Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Welcome to our special, our last one before the election, Trump 2020, the final push. I want to take us back to 2016. There were three main complaints against President Trump. I want to go through those and review them here and see how he's done, see if they've come to fruition. The first was he's totally unhinged. It's dangerous for him to have the nuclear codes. Remember that one? 4 years later, no new wars, troops home, and Middle East peace deals, like peace deal a day. So that didn't work out. Second complaint, he's a tyrant. He's a tyrant and a dictator. 4 years later, no power grabs, no consolidation of federal power whatsoever. With COVID, the complaint from the left was he didn't make enough federal dictates like a king would. He had every chance to, and he never did. He embraced federalism throughout all of COVID, as he should have. But that's not what tyrants do. Timothy Snyder is a historian, and he wrote this super hack piece at Salon. Right? And he said, obviously, we're in a slow motion Reichstag fire right now. Oh, this is like Trump's, so Reichstag fire. So real quick, Reichstag is the Capitol building in Germany. And in 1933, there was this major fire in the building. And at the time, none of the political parties had any control. So there's this big power vacuum, and who's gonna take over? So this fire happened, and no one knows who said it. I think today still no one really knows who said it. But Hitler, at the time, claimed, and Hitler was just like a nobody, right? He claimed that it was the communists. It was the communists who said it. So give me power so that I can stop these traitorous communists from taking over. And the president at the time signed this act, and it abolished freedom of speech and assembly and the press and privacy, and 4,000 people were arrested that night. The communists won, I think it was 17% of the election in their Congress, but most of them were arrested, and that made the Nazis have all this political power. So that's the very short of it. But Reichstag fire is a metaphor for a disaster that you take advantage of and consolidate power and leads to more power, right? Never let a good crisis go to waste. A quote said, not by Trump. Here's the quote from the Salon historian. This is what is happening. Donald Trump is not as skilled as Hitler. He doesn't work as hard as Hitler. He doesn't have the same level of confidence as Hitler, but he's clearly looking for that Reichstag fire emergency to take over power. But no, COVID was the Reichstag fire. That was it. That was the chance. And he did not consolidate power at all. Again, the complaint from the left was that he didn't do enough. He didn't take enough power. And even law and order, he did not send in federal troops. Now he did ultimately, eventually, like when the cities were begging him to, but he didn't like take over law enforcement, right? He didn't take over local cities and, what's what I'm looking for, like quarter troops or whatever. He didn't do any of that stuff. So this hot-headed psychopath that we were told Trump was, the tyrant, he can't be contained. He has showed remarkable restraint of power. And it's pretty amazing that we're just supposed to ignore that. And third, the claim was, and still is, that he's a danger to our institutions. NATO, he got other nations to pay their agreed upon share, which by the way is not what Russia wants, right? Trump made that point at the debate. Biden calls him Putin's puppy and a Russian stooge. That makes no sense. You look at all the things that Trump has done against Russia, including giving Ukraine weapons to defend themselves from Russia and also building up NATO. He's strengthened that important international institution. And here at home, he's done nothing to get rid of any federal government. I wish he had done some more to get rid of like the Department of Education or whatever. He hasn't done any of that. He hasn't got rid of any institution right? But at the same time, the left is saying, oh, he's going to get rid of our institutions or he's ruining our institutions. The left comes in and says, we need to end the filibuster, pack the court, get rid of the Electoral College. We need truth and reconciliation commissions. Right? Like, what? The left is all the things they say they hate about Trump. I'll say it again, because this was true in 2016. The left is all the things that they say they hate about Trump. It's been 4 years of projection. And on top of that, the media has done nothing but try to discredit this president for 4 years. And almost all the complaints I hear against the president, like 99% of them, truly, are movies that people make up in their head. That's a term that we came up with 4 years ago, people making up movies in their head. And we do it all the time. Someone just shares a little nugget, and you just instantly make up a movie. You make up the scene, you make up the motives, you make up the characters, you make up the actions, you make up everything about it, and then get outraged by it. The thing that you made up in your head. Do you remember the vaulted New York Times editorial back in 2018? It was written by an anonymous senior official inside the White House. And the New York Times framed it. And everyone made these crazy movies in their head that this was some super high-level senior official cabinet member. And this cabinet member was talking about how evil and unhinged Trump is and how he is thwarting Trump's every move inside the White House in order to save the Republic. It read like a spy novel. It was like a spy thriller. And shockingly, this guy also went on to write a book, right? But everyone just made up a movie in their head. I mean, it was anonymous. Everyone just made it up. Like, what's this guy look like? What job does he even have? How much does he even know the president or talk with the president or what conversations are being had? Everyone just made it up and they got outraged by it. And now, for some reason, the guy announced who he is. So who is it? CNN ran a piece back in 2018. 13 possible officials that this could be. And they thought it could be Mike Pence. What if it was Mike Pence throwing his boss under the bus? What if it was Ivanka and Jared? Or Melania. CNN even threw out the idea that it was Melania. Now, you're not going to believe this. It turns out that anonymous is Miles Taylor. Wow. Robbie Suave from Reason, he wrote on Twitter, he said, Miles Taylor, the Miles Taylor? Oh, this changes everything. He's a nobody. He was the deputy chief of staff at the then, to Kirsten Nielsen, who was the Department of Homeland Security chair. Like, he had no interaction with the president at all. The Department of Homeland Security website has a list of the 73 senior officials at Homeland Security at that time. He wasn't even on the list. So he's at best the 74th highest ranking person in the Department of Homeland Security. He's like a middle-level guy, a total Biden hack. 2 years of people making up movies about this guy. 4 years of everyone assuming the absolute worst about everything the president ever does or says. And I think the American people are just sick of it. I'm over it. And they see this intentional effort from the media of trying to take Trump down these 4 years. And I think the American people are over it. And I think they're going to give him another 4 years. Will you? Trump 2020, the final push. Let's talk about ground games coming up next. We'll talk about polls, voter registration, early ballots. We'll talk about all that coming up with our next guest. Now, no matter what happens, it's going to be chaos. It's going to be chaos. There's no way Trump wins and the left is like, great job, Mr. President. We embrace you now with open arms. Here's to another 4 years. Like, that's no way that's going to happen. Right? It's going to be absolute chaos in the street. It's going to make George Floyd riots look like a picnic if Trump wins. If Biden wins, I mean, raising taxes, and he's going to keep us shut down forever, and we haven't even seen the ramifications of the COVID lockdowns yet. Whatever it is, I see gold going up. I see gold as such a smart, safe thing to do and to put money into right now. We also have trillions of dollars of spending, trillions of dollars of Fed printing money that we somehow have to pay for. And gold, it's really tied to the value of the dollar, right? The value of the dollar goes down, the price of gold goes up, and the dollar is going down like nothing we've ever seen. So how do you get gold in your hands as quickly as possible? Patriot Gold Group. I've talked to all their top executives. I've talked to 2 of their advisors, like when you call in and the guys who answer the phone. And they all say they've never seen anything like this. They've never seen people buying gold and silver like this ever before. and you still can. And they mail it to you. It's amazing. You can have this in your hands before things hit the fan. Tuesday, Patriot Gold Group. If you want to sell it back at any time, no commissions, no fees, which is great, right? Super easy. 1-800-798-4260. Or so you can sell it back whenever you want, or you just keep it forever and hand it down to your kids and their kids and their kids and their kids. You buy gold. 1-800-798-4260 or patriotgoldgroup.com. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special Trump 2020, the final push. All right, I want to go to our data analyst guy, Chris Wilson. He's the CEO of WPA Intelligence. They're a polling and data science firm, and he was the head of polling and analytics for Cruz in 2016. Chris, how are you, brother?
I'm doing great, thanks. Thanks for having me back.
Good. We have a ton to do here. So, first question. I look at states like Florida, and you have Biden and Trump. They're doing this, right? And like Biden's up by 9 or 4 or 5, and then all of a sudden, it just flips. Like we saw in Florida on, I think it was Tuesday, finally Florida went for Trump. Why the pivot at the last minute? How do you account for that?
Well, two reasons really. One is just bad polling. It's why you look at a Real Clear Politics average or a Pollster.com average, and you see that if you look at those, it's got Trump averaging out at about a half a point ahead of Biden. But the other reason, and we do see this some, is Trump, when he goes into an area and has a rally, he actually has a few thousand people turn out, unlike Joe Biden, who does his circle thing and has like 15 people there and a couple of empty chairs. It has an impact on turnout. And so if you do have a polling firm that is accounting for that, you'll see that. And I'll tell you, last cycle, is sort of a random example, but I did polling for Kevin Cramer in North Dakota when he was running against incumbent Senator Heidi Heitkamp. And Heitkamp had been up throughout the entire election, and then Trump goes to North Dakota in July, and the polls just flip. And the reason they flipped is because the academic research shows us that the most impactful event you can do from a campaign perspective on both turnout and persuasion are events, rallies. And so we continually see that whenever Trump goes into an area, it can have that impact of flipping the script on a state. And so I do believe if you had one single pollster that was looking at the state and he was kind of scoring for likely turnout, and Trump goes to the villages, and all of a sudden turnout in the villages goes from 60% to 80 to 90%, that could be reflected in those sort of movement in the polls. And I think that's what you see that occurred in Florida.
I would have guessed that it doesn't. I would have questioned why we even do these rallies, like if it even does make a difference. So does it make a difference in getting the low propensity Trump voter to actually show up, or is it switching votes, or what's it doing exactly?
A little bit of both. And not to put your viewers asleep right now, but it is, I'll tell you what we do is we score every single voter for their behavioral likelihood to turn out and vote. And so think about it on a vertical axis, and you have 0 is no likelihood to vote, and 1 is completely, absolutely, definitely likely to turn out. 0.5, anybody above 0.5 is going to vote. Anybody below 0.5 is not going to vote. And so if you're doing a poll, only the people you're polling are all the ones above 0.5. Well, then Trump goes in, has a rally, and you look at those ones below 0.5 that wouldn't typically turn out and vote, and all of a sudden they're more motivated. They turn out and vote. Maybe it's just the 0.4s, the 0.3s, and then after a while he goes back, and you've got the Republican Party and the campaigns, and they're calling the 0.2s and the 0.1s. And that's why if you look at the early vote in Florida, Democrats had a huge lead whenever absentee ballots came in. And then over the last couple of days, we've seen it completely switch. And now Republicans have, you just take Miami-Dade County, where they've almost got a 10-point lead. And that is a remarkable turnaround that I believe you can directly tie to the president's events in the state.
Unbelievable. All right, give me a couple other things that determine that voter propensity score.
Oh, there's thousands of things that factor into our algorithm on that.
Really?
But, yeah, there really are. I mean, literally thousands. But the biggest factor, no matter what, is going to be whether or not they voted in the past. But the problem with a year like 2020 is you can just throw out the script, much like you could in 2018. And I'll give you an example there. You mentioned my work for Ted Cruz. I did his race last year against Beto O'Rourke. Well, the first predictive model we built, bear in mind, Texas at the time had 15.6 million registered voters. The first predictive model we built had 5.6 million voters turn out and voting in 2018. That would have been, on average, it actually would have been a little bit high compared to past off-year elections. Our last turnout model was 8.3 million, ended up being 8.6 million voted. And you just saw it kept ticking up and ticking up and ticking up. A lot of that had to do with the excitement around Senator Cruz, or the excitement of Democrats around Beto O'Rourke. Trump came to Houston, Harris County, right before the election. Beto O'Rourke raised and spent more than anybody in the history of American politics running for the United States Senate, $90 million. He hired 900 field reps, went door to door and basically drug people to the polls. So all those things factored into increased turnout from our first model of 5.6 to our last, ultimate turnout, 8.6, increased and caused 3 million more people to vote than had been anticipated. And I think all of those things factor into it. Now, of those 3 million, many of them had not ever voted in an off-year election before. And so what we found is we had to really adjust our algorithm for its understanding of what it is that motivates somebody to turn out in what was the highest off-year election turnout in Texas in 104 years. And I think we're going to see similar types of increases this year.
Give me some other standards, because I'm trying to figure out who would show up and who wouldn't, just casually, right? So what are these other things that get someone to vote?
One is knocking on your door, and that has a big impact. Somebody comes to your door and says, Mike, you got to get out and vote. One of them is offering you a drive to the polls on election day. In California, ballot harvesting is legal, where you can send out ballots and then go to their homes and try and pick them up and take them in yourself. There's just so many factors that increase turnout. But when it gets down to it, all of those factors together, combined, do not have the impact of a rally. And that's, I really underanalyzed what the impact of that would be in 2016, because we saw a similar phenomenon where Trump would turn out and he'd have thousands of people. Hillary Clinton would go to a field and she'd have a couple senior citizens who, basically their kids brought them there and they weren't even sure why they were there, and they thought they were going to get an autograph or something. And I think we're seeing the same sort of thing now. I mean, the event from this week with the circles in the lawn drawing, the chairs in the middle of it, it was almost sad from a perspective of somebody running for United States president.
That's gonna be the postmortem. I mean, it was the postmortem for Hillary. She never went to Wisconsin once. Right. And it's going to be the postmortem for Biden. Like, what did you do the last week when Trump's going to 10 different states, 26 different rallies? I think he had like 10 rallies in 8 states in the last 2 days, the final 2 days of the campaign plan. Anyway, yeah, that's amazing. And I'm super grateful you brought that up. Okay, one last question about 2016. Did other polling companies change their methodology of polling to account for the changes of 2016? Or did they just assume that 2016 was this weird anomaly and we're going to stick to our guns with how we've always done polling?
2016 was an anomaly, and that's really something that I become frustrated when I hear pollsters who go on and say that polling was wrong in 2016. It absolutely was not. If you look at, again, go to the real sometime I'll get it right, Real Clear Politics average, it has Hillary Clinton above by 3 points. She won the national vote by 3 points. The difference is the state polling. And in fact, I mean, we were doing work for the Club for Growth in the Ron Johnson race, and we had Donald Trump going ahead there. There was people who had Trump moving ahead in Michigan. There's people who had Trump moving ahead in North Carolina. In fact, Clinton only led by 0.7 in North Carolina leading into the election. That is well within any margin of error. Even if you're doing 1,000 interviews, there's a 3% margin of error, and so Trump wins by 1 point. That's the swing that you would expect. So it's really a misnomer that the polling was wrong. And I'll point out, I mean, really the last time I see some people in my profession, particularly on the Republican side, who go on TV and say, we have to unskew the polls, we have to add people to it. I mean, the last time Republicans engaged in widespread poll unskewing was 2012, and they all just ended up doing a long walk of shame on Election Day. And I think we'll set ourselves up for the same now. If we listen to the new unskewers who figure they're going to get more famous or make a buck by trying to tell everyone else they're wrong. And in fact, if you just look at the polling today compared to 16, I'll give you a few examples. In Wisconsin, going in, Clinton led by 5.7. Biden today leads by 5.5. Now, that was a week out. That's kind of where the polling stops. Things shift. Yeah. Vote was down in the the Milwaukee area, and that's what caused those things to change. In North Carolina, Clinton led by 0.7, less than 1 point. Biden leads today by 0.7. In Pennsylvania, going into the election a week out, Clinton led by 6. Today, Biden leads by 3.8. So all of those changes were well within the margin. That's why if you go back and look at Nate Silver's likelihood to win, he had Trump had a 28% likelihood to win in 2016. So think about that. You pull out a hat, you put 4 names in. Trump's written on it once, and Clinton's written on it 4 times. You got a 1 in 4 chance of pulling Trump out. I would say today it's about 1 in 5 or 1 in 6. And that's for just being realistic in terms of looking at those state polls. But it doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means that it's less of a likelihood when you look at how much things have to change. Now, the one difference, Mike, that I have to point out is you think the weekend before the election was the James Comey talking about the emails again. Is the Hunter Biden emails, are those the same phenomenon that is created? And I can't answer that question. But I will say, for those changes to take place in 2016 took an event, and the same thing's got to happen in 2020.
Yeah. I don't think the Hunter Biden ones are, because I think the media's learned their lesson, clearly, as we've seen how little they handled that. But yes, interesting. Okay. And I know nothing, but my map was analyzing the least that Trump has to do to win. I'm giving Biden all the western states, so Colorado, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico. I'm giving him Michigan. And I'm seeing it coming down to Trump needs to win Florida, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania. I have him winning Ohio, no problem. I have him winning Florida. I want to get your take on North Carolina, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. I think Pennsylvania is the biggest of those 5. First of all, what do you think of what I said so far? Feel free to throw it totally under the bus.
I would disagree with you on Nevada. We did some poll there recently for the Las Vegas Review-Journal, and it actually had Trump up too. And it is what we've seen in Nevada is turnout is actually down with Democrats there for whatever reason. I think a lot of it has to do with frustration with Governor Sisolak, who continues to keep the state closed down. And I think that's hurting the Democrat vote there. And so that's going to be a lot closer than people think. And in fact, Republicans could pick up a congressional seat there in Nevada 3, where Dan Rotheimer, who's running against Susie Lee, has been right within the margin of error throughout the entire time, which would be fun. He's a former WWE professional wrestler. It'd be great to have him in Congress, kind of throwing some cheers. But
that's right. So Trump's in the WWE Hall of Fame. So I got 2 minutes. So I hate to cut you off here. Let's do the most important first. I think Pennsylvania is the most important. What are we looking at there?
Well, right now, Biden had a bigger lead than he has today. 2 events that I think have occurred that the media has had no choice but to cover. One is Biden saying shut down fossil fuels. 2 are the riots right now in Philadelphia. I mean, those rioters should be donating the washers and dryers they're wheeling out in their quest for food and bread as an in-kind contribution to the Trump campaign.
Yeah, amazing. So I made these numbers up, but I said if Trump won 10% of the votes in Philadelphia, I think with that and other criminal justice reform and other things, maybe he gets 30% of the vote in Philadelphia. Do you think that much of an increase potentially?
That would be significant, I think, but he's going to run up the score so much in the middle of the state that he may not need that much. So it's going to be, but I do think it's going to have an impact, maybe not in Philadelphia, but in the surrounding counties, the areas that they get the news from that area. And I think that in and of itself it could be enough. It's probably enough. I'll just predict. I think it likely is enough to flip Pennsylvania. I think Trump ends up winning Pennsylvania.
That'd be huge. Okay, Wisconsin.
Wisconsin is, the Democrats there kind of tamped down the riots. Again, at this point, 4 years ago, Clinton won by led by 5.7. Today, Biden leads by 5.5. Is turnout in the Milwaukee area increased enough that it causes Biden to win where Clinton did not? And I don't know. I got to say, as of today, I would predict that Biden probably wins Wisconsin. So he's got to pick up one of the other states that you don't think he will.
Oh, interesting. Arizona, maybe. What's Arizona?
Arizona could be. I've seen that state get a lot closer. At this point, though, 4 years ago, Trump led by 1.5. Biden today leads by 2.4. But again, well within the margin of error. And McSally has run a very strong campaign. We've seen a lot done there. Trump's gone into this area. I really feel good about Trump's opportunities in Arizona. I think that's one that could surprise a lot of people.
Give me North Carolina, and then I'll let you have one more wild card.
I think Trump wins North Carolina. I think the Senate race there has flipped over the course of the last few days. I've been looking at the polling coming out of the Tillis campaign, and I trust them. They're smart, good people who know the state, and so I think I think Trump wins North Carolina, and it's gonna. You know what? It could happen here. This could come down to Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, which is its own electoral college vote. Yeah, wouldn't that be crazy if they're counting there for the next few days?
Whew. All right, well, give me one more state. Is that your state? Nebraska's first congressional district?
Yeah, it is. It's its own electoral vote. It separates out. And I think you could see a situation come down to where you're looking at, one electoral vote going one way or the other. That very well could be Nebraska too.
That's why Trump wrapped up the day there on Tuesday, I think it was.
Exactly right.
All right, Chris Wilson. Go to Chris Wilson WPA on Twitter. Chris, let's do a post-mortem, if you don't mind, afterwards. We can see how things turned out.
Let's do it. Hopefully I'm not wrong. Apologize.
Same here. Chris, appreciate you, man. We'll do it again. All right, Trump 2020, the final push indeed. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special Trump 2020, the final push. I think without a doubt, the biggest blunder of the campaign was Biden at the debate, talking about fracking and banning fracking and not banning fracking, and now he's for fracking, and it's gonna crush him in Pennsylvania and some other states. So to talk about that, Dan Eberhart is here. He's the CEO of Canary, which is a full-service oil company based out of Colorado. Dan, how are you, brother?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, good to talk to you. So, do you believe this is the biggest blunder? And it's in Pennsylvania we see it. And what other states do you think this will really hurt Biden?
Well, I also think it hurts a lot of congressional candidates. It's got a lot of Democratic congressional candidates in tight races around the country, trying to figure out, how to get out from under Biden too. But look, I think this is ground zero for this election is Pennsylvania. If you assume that Trump has to win Florida and that's a must win for him, then it all comes down to Pennsylvania as the likely tipping point for the election. And I think that, Pennsylvania is the Saudi Arabia of natural gas, the heart of the Marcellus Shale, and Biden stepped in it. He's trying to have three different sides of a two-sided argument here with regards to fracking. He's for it, he's against it, he's going to ban it on federal lands. Don't listen to what he said in February, listen to what he said in October. It's a mess for him.
Actually, let's define terms here. So I used to live right next to literally Marcellus, New York. So I know this, but what is fracking?
So fracking is, normally if you think about drilling is you're putting a straw in your drink and you're getting the liquid from the very bottom. Well, fracking is basically puncturing holes kind of very near the bottom, but being able to draw from bigger surface areas so you can get more oil and gas. And what it's done is in the last 10 years, it's allowed us to push the cost to get more oil easier and push the cost of oil and the cost of natural gas down.
Why would one be against it?
I don't really understand. I think it's people that don't understand the industry. The industry is very focused on being clean, being safe, and being good environmental stewards. Look, everybody wants clean water. Everybody wants clean air, including folks in the oil and gas industry. I think that this is being anti-fracking is an applause line in a Democratic primary. But I think if you ask consumers, do you want to pay twice as much for energy? Do you want to pay 40% more for a plane ticket? The answer is a resounding no. And I think that the problem that Biden stepped into right now is, for people in Pennsylvania, it also affects their jobs. And so do you want, your son, your cousin, your husband to lose his job? And more importantly, do you want your community to just take a huge economic hit? Because this also affects the hairdressers, the retailers, the restaurants, the banks in these towns as well, particularly in places like Pennsylvania, also Oklahoma, Texas, the Dakotas, places like that. But this is just a huge, slap in the face of their way of life. And I think that this is just another version of the Democrats coming for your guns and the deplorables comment in 2016. This is Biden's moment for that.
Yeah. And Trump brought that up in the debate the other day. He brought up God, guns, and oil. Like that's the three things that they're coming for. What is the nuance of federal land that he's trying to like carve out here? What's the significance of why he would do that?
It's easier for him to do, and he can do it with an executive order. But I think that he's trying to signal to his base that, look, I embrace the Green New Deal. I embrace all these leftist proposals. But then he's trying to have some wiggle room, which is, what he spent since the debate he's been trying to do, right? I thought it was a cute stunt. He goes 15 miles from his home and, across the Pennsylvania line to give a speech. Meanwhile, Trump's holding 3 rallies in the state with an average, of 10 or 12,000 participants a rally, and Biden's speaking to 8 people as usual. But it's really a case of trying to narrow down what's going on to a pro-growth energy policy or something that's going to raise the cost for consumers to meet this kind of aspirational loony left goal of renewable resources that are going to take over supposedly somehow for oil and gas in the next 5 years. It's not going to happen. It's aspirational. We simply can't afford it.
Yeah. Tell us, what's the importance of oil? I mean, this is such a ridiculous question, right? But people don't recognize, they don't realize. What's the importance of oil, like the products it's used in and like the effect that it has on our economy today? I feel like we're so used to it and we assume, and as you said, we just sort of think like, oh, we'll just stop using it.
First of all, for you and your listeners, what other commodity price do you know? You know roughly where the price of oil is. It's right up there with the Dow Jones average and whatever on the nightly news. No one knows the price of coal, the price of natural gas, the price of iron ore. No one knows. You know the price of oil. It's on the gas stations. The price of the pump is out there for everyone to see. But oil is used in plastics. It's used in tires. It's used in the road. The asphalt in the street has got oil in it. It's in products all over the country, and it affects the transportation cost. It's 40% of the price of your, airplane ticket.
Yeah. It's everything made of plastic. It's literally everything because everything is delivered by a truck. So it's literally everything it affects. And we're just going to play this pipe dream like we can just get rid of it. What states does fracking in particular affect? So obviously Pennsylvania, but what other states do you think is going to have a
and then indirectly, effect? I would say it makes a big play in Wisconsin. A lot of the sand used in fracking, the gold standard for sand used in fracking comes from Wisconsin. So I think that's kind of the electoral play there. But I would say the biggest states would be North Dakota, Oklahoma, and Texas, followed by Pennsylvania, New Mexico, and Colorado.
Okay, talk to me about Colorado, because out of those, that's probably the closest rate. Pennsylvania, obviously, but then Colorado, and that especially helps Gardner, right? So what's the deal with that Senate race there and also fracking in general in Colorado?
Yeah, well, I mean, that Senate race here, most of the polls have got Hickenlooper ahead. Hickenlooper's, quite frankly, run a very horrible campaign. But I think he's a little bit like a mini Joe Biden in terms of being past his sell-by date. When he ran for president, he wasn't going to run for the Senate seat, isn't interested. Typical politician, flipped. But, the state's kind of moved against Gardner a little bit. But I think Gardner has done, a lot of what he said he was going to do. And he's got some space with Trump on some issues, but has been a very effective senator for the state of Colorado. But the Denver and surrounding areas is again very anti-fracking as an applause line, but the rest of the state is really pro oil and gas.
Would you have a prediction on that race?
I think Gardner will beat the spread and eke out a narrow victory.
That's great. Okay, and then I think again Pennsylvania. I think that's now Trump territory because of all this. Beautiful. Dan Eberhart, Dan K. Eberhart on Twitter from Canary. Dan, appreciate you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Have a great day. Our first interview on the streets of New York City. That was pretty good. Definitely will be looked back on. Well, the biggest blunder for Biden is going to be he never campaigned anywhere ever. Which is wild that he can get away with that. I mean, 2016, the big postmortem was Hillary never went to Wisconsin. How could you never, ever one time step foot in Wisconsin? And it's going to be the same with Biden. How come Biden never went anywhere? He literally never went anywhere. And that fracking moment is going to crush him in Pennsylvania. No doubt about it. All right. The final push. Here we are, just a couple days away. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special Trump 2020, the final push. This is it. We only have a few days left. I want to go to Jessica Anderson. She's the executive director of Heritage Action, affiliated with the Heritage Foundation, and they're on the ground in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Iowa, and North Carolina. So we definitely have to talk about those 4 states. Jessica, how are you today?
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Doing great.
Good to talk to you. I want to talk about those 4, but let's just big picture first. What is your assessment on how each campaign has been run, presidential campaign, Trump and Biden?
Well, first and foremost, there's a really clear contrast between President Trump's campaign and what Vice President Biden and Kamala Harris have been focused on the last 6 months. With President Trump, you see a ton of energy behind him. You've seen the wind in his sail after the successful confirmation process of Judge Amy Coney Barrett. You see great unemployment numbers coming out. Riding all of that wind into Election Day, I think, is really significant. And then the structure of the president's campaign is really different than Vice President Biden's. He has been on the ground talking to voters in battleground states for months. They made a significant early investment in the ground game, and they also made significant investments in voter registration. And I think that's going to end up being kind of the untold story or one of those data points that we take away from this campaign of really going after new voters that have been frustrated by the extreme left, bringing them over so that they realize that the policies that this president advocates for are for the benefit of all Americans, bringing in those first-time voters or updating registrations if people move states, anything like that. I think those early voter registration numbers are really going to be the story that the president can hang his hat on his path to 270. And you contrast all of that with Vice President Biden, who has a very limited campaign schedule, a very skeleton crew on the ground. He really has just relied on being the anti-Trump candidate. And he thinks it's going to be enough. I don't think it's going to be enough. I think swing voters want to see more. They want to see more answers to those difficult questions they're searching for when they look at candidates. And I think that's really what's going in to this last weekend as we, near Election Day.
It's so odd because the three things you said, rallies, and we just talked to Ted Cruz's former guy who said the rallies, but more than anything, are the most important thing that a candidate can do. He said more than all the other things combined. So you have rallies, knocking on doors, and registering voters. That's like campaign 101. And Trump's been doing it, obviously. What's up with the Biden team? It doesn't make any sense. What are they thinking?
Well, I think they think that this strategy of just being anti-Trump is going to be enough. I think they think that they can put someone like Kamala Harris, one of the most liberal and extreme senators in the United States Senate, on the ticket, and that will rally women. I think they're mistaken about that. They're overplaying their hand on the policy issues that swing voters in particular are looking at. And so, when a swing voter gets into that booth, they're thinking of things like, who do I trust to bring back the economy? Who do I trust to keep me and my family safe and secure? Who do I trust to ensure that my children have a good school and education process? Who do I trust for my job and economic growth and wage stability? I mean, these are the questions top of mind, and Vice President Biden just can't answer those by simply just saying he's anti-Trump. He doesn't have solutions for this. And what we've heard from him, support for the Green New Deal, support for fracking, eliminating all of those oil jobs in the Midwest. I mean, that stuff concerns all of us. And I think that's going to come out in the next few days.
Not to mention law and order in the background, hence the police siren. I just think it's so weird. The big criticism against Hillary from Democrats was, oh, you never went to Wisconsin, Hillary. Why didn't you go to Wisconsin? And on Wednesday, Biden never left Delaware.
Yeah.
It's so bizarre. I don't understand this thought. Okay, I want to talk, because you're on the ground and you're talking to people in these battleground states. I don't understand the non-voter, right? I'll just throw it there, because I've always voted, I'll always vote. I'm like a high propensity voter, right? I'm going to vote every primary, midterm election, right? So who's the person that's like, man, I don't know if I'm going to vote? Because you're knocking on doors, right? And you're interacting with these people. What motivates these people? Why are they not voting? Why are they hesitant about voting? Why have they not voted in the past? Explain this person to me.
So it's really interesting. The voter that waits right up to the election day to make a decision is really someone that is frustrated and concerned with some of the personalities or the personal politics that are at play right now. They may not like the way President Trump talks or his tweets, but they're looking specifically at what he has done for them. What has he done for the country? What has he done for their family, for their friends, for they themselves as an individual? And so what we find at the door is that once we identify ourselves and say that we're here on behalf of the conservative movement, here to talk about American values, they just open up in conversation. They're really timid if we first knock, of actually sharing that they are going to support President Trump or support the GOP. It's not until we start talking to them and say, look, we care about American values, we care about jobs, we care about the economy, healthcare, school, law and order, safety and security. You go through the list, and then you peel back those layers and get to the heart of these concerns, which is these are issue-based voters, and they're trying to put aside the personality politics and focus on the issues.
Yeah. And you think you've been able to turn voters who were thinking about staying home into Trump voters?
Well, that's what we're working on right now. We have a final push out the door to over 2 million swing voters in these targeted states with get out the vote text messages, emails, calls, and door knocks, all reminding them. And one of the things that Heritage Action did that was unique is we started with these voters early. So we started knocking on doors and doing phone calls April 1st. And that was in the middle of all the lockdowns in states. And so we were one of the only people talking to voters and softening them on these issues so that they knew who to trust going forward. And so now is the time to go back to them, remind them of the commitments that they made through the spring and summer, and have that final push for get out the vote.
Yeah, really good. Okay, talk to me about some of these states. So Pennsylvania, we talked about earlier with an oil guy. Obviously, Biden's fracking comments are just devastating for him there. How are you seeing Pennsylvania?
So I think Pennsylvania is very much in play. I don't know that you could have said that 3 weeks ago, but I think Vice President's comments on fracking and his support of the Green New Deal is very concerning to a state like Pennsylvania, who understands what it's like to lose an entire industry essentially overnight. You've got Black Monday, which was a date in 1977 when the steel mills started closing in Youngstown, Ohio, and then just ripped across the state of Pennsylvania, starting in Western PA. People that are alive today were alive then. They remember what those closures are. The impact and the scars are still there when you look at jobs. So anyone that makes a paycheck in shale country is impacted from potential shale closures.
Wow.
And
so you guys tell them that. You bring that up again. You guys bring up that, because I don't know anything about that steel closure across Pennsylvania, or the fact that it happened, like you call it, like a Black Monday. So you bring that up again and remind people about that, or do you even need to?
We remind them if they don't know, but the reality is they remember, because it's still talked about. The scars are still felt. And it's a kitchen table conversation, because if not, their parents and their grandparents were in the middle of this when this happened in the late 70s. And so this state, they know what it's like for an industry just to be completely uprooted overnight, and they're not going to let that happen again. I think there's a lot of concern that, next Tuesday could be a Black Tuesday, and they don't want that to happen because they want their jobs and they want their economic stability.
That's so interesting. And it's so interesting how these local stories and local angles are what really matters. I mean, I could talk big picture about fracking, but it's on the ground history like that really matters in the end. We got like 2 minutes. Let's roll through Wisconsin. So I think Trump's going to win Pennsylvania. Wisconsin seems to be a little more tight. What's going on there?
Wisconsin's a state that is going to rely heavily on the issue of safety and security and law and order. You've got the rioting that happened in Kenosha, fresh of mind of voters' minds. You've got a state that is very, very fickle when it comes to their swing voters. But this law and order issue and how the violence was just unchecked for so long is top of mind for everyone in the state. So the president is right to talk about how he wants to quell the violence, how he wants to restore safety and security. And the more he can drive that message home, the better he's going to do with those voters.
Yeah, just like Kenosha is such a metaphor for everyone in the country, that this violence can come to your town. But I have to imagine it's pretty powerful for the people of Wisconsin. Is that enough to get people out, you think?
I'm hopeful it will be, because I think that at the end of the day, you can care about healthcare, school, jobs, the economy, immigration. But if you and your family don't feel safe and secure, you can't even get to those other issues. It's one of the most basic instinctual issues that we as voters have, the safety and security of ourselves and of our families.
Yeah, it's the prereq to everything. Tell me about Iowa. I haven't thought about Iowa at all. I've always assumed it was red, but it might not be.
Well, Iowa's a significant state for the Senate as well. You have to remember, Joni Ernst is in the fight of her life for that Senate seat. She is working hard on the ground. And so you've got a situation where Iowa is one that the president needs to win. And Joni Ernst, for Republicans to keep control of the Senate majority, she needs to win. So we've been talking to voters there about the issues of safety and security, economic recovery post-COVID, healthcare, farming, all of these issues that are top of mind to Iowa voters.
And then I got to talk to you about this enthusiasm gap. We talked about it on the show yesterday. It's like there were people who were very excited to vote for Hillary, right? I don't know anyone who's excited to vote for Joe Biden. Like that seems non-existent. How much is that going to help the president?
Well, I think look no further than who shows up at their rallies. I mean, it's a night and day difference, right? You've got President Trump still in the middle of COVID, having lines around the block, people eager to get out there. I mean, the vice president was in Florida and it was pouring, or North Carolina, and it was pouring rain. I mean, people are enthusiastic because they see the impact of the Trump administration's policies on their daily lives, and that's something to celebrate. Jobs, economic recovery, safety and security, all things to celebrate. Compare that with Biden, where he can't get people to show up. There's no enthusiasm. And when you simply run on being the anti-something, it's just not enough. It's not enough to get people excited about you. And I think we're going to see that come to play on Election Day. And as we get through the next few days and we can assess what happened, I think the big stories are going to be that new voter registration numbers compared with the enthusiasm and the excitement for the president's governing agenda, and how those policy issues brought voters out to support him and to support the GOP this November.
Yeah, I think that's so right. And it's almost surreal to be in the middle of it here and like to know that it's happening in real time right here. I think that's awesome. Jessica Anderson, Executive Director, Heritage Action. Jessica, appreciate you, man. We can talk, do a little postmortem afterwards.
That'd be great. Thanks for having me.
We'll say, see, Jessica was right. We'll play all these clips back. That's it. Trump 2020, final push. This is it. It's game time. I'll see you next week. Spread the word.